The regular meeting of Lakewood City Council for November 20th, 2023 is hereby called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. We will now pause for a moment of silence. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Baker.
Here.
Bullock.
Here.
Keppel. Absent. Litton.
Here.
Marks. Here. Rader.
Yep.
Schachner.
Here.
Move to excuse the absence of Vice President Keppel.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes.
Reading and disposal of the minutes of the regular meeting of council held November 6, 2023.
Move to dispose without the necessity of a reading.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 1, Resolution 2023-51, a resolution to take effect immediately, adopting the City of Lakewood ADA self-evaluation and transition plan.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Colleagues, any discussion? I know we have some individuals signed up for public comment as well. All right. First individual signed in for public comment on this item is Tracy Greenberg. And make sure that green light is on. There you go.
Got it. Thank you.
Name and address for the record, if you don't mind.
My name is Tracy Greenberg from 1423 Lauderdale.
Thank you.
I'm the co-chair of the ADA Transition Plan Task Force of Lakewood. And I first wanted to thank all of you, of course. I wanted to acknowledge the ADA Transition Plan Task Force members, Ami Young, co-chair, members Christina Taman, Chris Cowan, Sean Mott, Tom McGraw, and our liaisons, Sarah Keppel, Michelle Nocta, Andrew Fleck, as well as our expert, Steve Meltzer, who was commissioned to draft the formalized self-assessment, as well as the ADA transition plan itself. And thank you for all your hard work and for leading the way in the creation of this plan to achieve full compliance for inclusion and accessibility of people of all abilities in the city of Lakewood, and to be implemented into completion over the next 30 years. And although these provisions are required by every city in Northern Ohio, Lakewood leads the way. It's my hope that Lakewood's creation of a self-assessment and transition plan will serve as a template for other communities in Northern Ohio. Communities who are still not caught up with these requirements, a 33-year-old federal regulation under Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Citizens need to hold their city administrators accountable. Lakewood has heard the voices of the disability community and answered appropriately. Please let our message echo throughout Northern Ohio. I would like to read a quote from a person who is known as the godmother of disability rights, Judy Heumann. Change never happens at the pace we think it should. It happens over years of people joining together, strategizing, sharing, and pulling all the levers they possibly can. Gradually, excruciatingly, slowly, things start to happen, and then suddenly, seemingly out of the blue, something will tip. I hope Lakewood will be that tipping point for the rest of Northern Ohio, all of Ohio, and the rest of the country. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you so much for your service on the task force. The next person signed in to speak is Ami Young.
Ami Young, 1620 Victoria Avenue, and like my colleague Tracy, I was co-chair of the ADA task force, and I am so grateful for all of the effort and energy that went into it and all the work that will go into implementing it. And I'm also grateful to all of our families. Tracy named all of our task force members, and I wanted to express my personal gratitude to our families for lending us the family members' time and talent to be a part of that, because I know what a sacrifice it was for my children and to have me spending an hour in Zoom every month when they really wanted mama time. And I know that several council members also know what that sacrifice is like, and our lovely mayor spends time here instead of with her child. And I just wanted to acknowledge that the next generation is counting on us to get this right. Demographics indicate that a sizable percentage of them will also be disabled, and they need this. They need us to stop dragging our feet. And likewise, the work has just begun. This is a beginning, not an ending, and we need to be doing better about making sure that silly things like that access door not working when I was trying to get into the building, because it's strapped open, and when it's strapped open, when you wave at the pretty button, it doesn't push the push bar in and open the door. So I needed my child to open the door for me to get in the building for today. And these are little things that are invisible if they don't impact you. So just please keep listening to those of us that are impacted by this. We will tell you if we know how to communicate with you, and we need to be working on processes of how to make sure that these issues are getting reported and acted upon and not falling into a black hole. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. And thank you to the both of you who spoke, as well as the entire task force for being that spark that Ms. Greenberg alluded to and making something happen for our city. Thank you for helping us to look at our entire city differently, I think, in terms of how we approach new projects, how we look at our aging infrastructure, and things like that. I also want to thank the administration for taking this mandate so seriously, as well as my colleagues for doing so and being very thoughtful with appointees to this task force and things like that. And thanks especially to Vice President Keppel as well for her work in shepherding along this committee as well. So on the motion to adopt, any further discussion, colleagues? Councilman Bullock? Oh, okay. Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And that motion passes. And with that, we do have a ceremonial resolution that we'd love to take a quick photo with members of the task force and any others that would like to who are here. All right, item 2. Let me try to do that.
Item 2, communication from Lakewood Animal Safety and Welfare Advisory Board regarding proposed increase to pet adoption fees.
Who, please, Councilwoman Marks, that'd be great.
Thank you. Mayor George, members of City Council, the
The Lakewood Animal Safety and Welfare Advisory Board supports Chief Fisher's proposed increase in adoption fees at the Lakewood Animal Shelter from $50 to $75 for cats and kittens and from $70 to $100 for dogs and puppies. As Chief Fisher notes in his recommendation, this increase would help cover spay and neuter surgeries, rabies vaccinations, and other medical and housing expenses. To ensure the increase serves this purpose, LSWAB members would like to see that this revenue is tracked and put directly back into the shelter, or that it comes with a corresponding budget increase. Presently, the shelter supervisor is able to use his discretion to lower fees when appropriate. We suggest that the supervisor continues to have flexibility on these fees, allowing for special promotions and discounted rates to encourage adoptions, such as those of older or bonded cats that are waiting to be adopted. For this reason, LSWAB recommends that the resolution establish the adoption fees not to exceed $75 for a cat, kitten, or $100 for a dog puppy. The LSWAB board appreciates the opportunity to contribute to this discussion and is always available to answer questions on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Receive and file.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion passes.
Item 3, substitute resolution 2023-43, a resolution to take effect immediately to increase the adoption fees for animals that are adopted through Lakewood Animal Shelter.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 4, report from Committee of the Whole, held November 13th, 2023.
Dear colleagues, the Committee of the Whole met on November 13th, 2023 to discuss 3 agenda items. The first item was Ordinance 13-2023A, which would authorize the mayor or Director of Planning and Development to enter into an amendment to the agreement for the sale of 12900 Madison Avenue. The city and Lakewood Community Services Center had previously entered into a sale agreement in July authorizing LCSC to purchase the property for $200,000. However, after LCSC received the results of its commercial inspection, they asked for a price reduction to help cover the estimated $104.6 thousand in additional unplanned expenses. The new negotiated purchase price would be $130,000. After hearing from Planning Director Leininger and representatives from LCSC, the Committee of the Whole moved to recommend adoption of the ordinance. The second item discussed was Resolution 2023-61, which would authorize council to appoint 5 members to the Charter Review Commission for a 6-month term beginning January 1, 2024. The committee discussed options to promote the call for applicants and heard from one interested applicant in attendance. It was decided to defer to this topic until there was a larger pool of applicants to consider. The final item discussed was Resolution 2023-60, which would authorize the spending of up to $150,000 on temporary measures to improve the frontage of the former Lakewood Hospital site. There was a robust conversation between committee members and Planning Director Leininger on what this may include, with the primary component likely being some sort of wrap around the perimeter fencing. This topic was also deferred to allow the administration time to review design options. Move to receive and file that communication.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 5, Resolution 2023-60, a resolution to take effect immediately appointing 5 members to the Charter Review Commission for a 6-month term beginning January 1st, 2024.
Unless anyone has any motions for names or anything along that line, I'll move to defer.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Looking forward to seeing who out there in Lakewood is interested in serving. On the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 6, Ordinance 13-2023A, an ordinance to take effect immediately authorizing and directing the mayor or Director of Planning and Development to enter into an amendment to the agreement for the sale of 12900 Madison Avenue.
Move to suspend our rules to adopt on second reading.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Baker?
Yes.
Bullock?
Yes.
Keppel? Oh, sorry. Absent. Letton?
Yes.
Marks?
Yes.
Rader?
Yes.
Schachner?
And that motion passes. Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, oh, I'm sorry, Madam Clerk.
Baker,
Yes.
Bullock.
Yes.
Litton,
Yes.
Marks,
Yes.
Rader,
Yes.
Shackner.
And that motion passes.
Item 7, report from Housing Planning and Development Committee regarding meeting held November 13th.
Chairman Bullock.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, the Housing Planning and Development Committee met November 13, 2023 to discuss proposed ordinance 7-2023, which proposes to amend various provisions of the codified ordinances to better accommodate accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. The original version of the legislation was simultaneously referred to the Housing Planning and Development Committee and to the Planning Commission for review back in March of this year. Planning Commission discussed the proposed ordinance at its May, July, August, and October meetings, and at its October meeting unanimously recommended significant expansion of the ordinance to council. Director Leininger and members of the Planning Commission attended our committee's November 13 meeting to present those proposed changes. And among the recommended revisions were defining accessory dwelling unit as a term, defining the maximum lot coverage and setting limits for maximum lot coverage in the R1 and R2 districts, establishing ADUs as a conditional use in the R2 district, and establishing 14 conditional use regulations on ADUs intended to protect the safety and character of the community. After a robust discussion, the Housing Planning and Development Committee favorably recommended proposed ordinance 7-2023 with the incorporation of the Planning Commission's revisions to the full council. The Housing Planning and Development Committee appreciates the teamwork and leadership of Councilmember Shackner, the Planning Commission, and the administration to activate accessory dwelling units as an important tool the city can use to expand our housing stock and increase and facilitate aging in place and enable intergenerational living arrangements in the years to come. Sincerely. Move to receive and file that communication.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion?
Real quick.
Councilman Schechter.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Councilmember Bullock. Thank you to administration. This is very exciting, the potential passage of the accessory dwelling unit legislation, which is something I ran on back in 2019, and I guess this is a nice bookend for it after earning re-election to have this pass subsequently. It would have been nice before re-election. It would have been helpful, but it was fine. I was fine. Thank you. But I do want to thank everybody that worked on this. This was this wasn't a light lift. The planning department especially worked very hard over the last 4 years in developing something that would work and was tailored to the city of Lakewood in terms of accessory dwelling units. And thank you to Housing Chair Bullock for seeing this through to the end. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. On the motion to receive and file, I'm sorry, Councilman Baker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the chair of the committee as well as Councilman Shackner. And I just want to say that, you know, and I had a work obligation last week, so I was unable to be at the committee hearing, but listening to the Planning Commission members, knowing the work they put into it, there's a former Planning Commission member here in the audience today that served with me, just shows how a good process can produce a good outcome. And it was really heartening for me to see that collaboration to produce this. Now, what I will say is it's kind of allowing some ADUs and seeing how they react, and then it sets up a section of the code that allows the city to be flexible going forward and kind of opening the gates a little bit more. I will say on the floor, I will likely, in the next ordinance, have an amendment to some small section of it that I would consider on the floor that I've talked to some folks about, but just would like to thank both Planning Commission, the administration, and council for this work, because I think it's really reflective of what a good process can produce a good outcome.
Thank you. Councilman Rader.
I'll jump in here too. Feeling the love tonight. But thank you to Councilman Shackner, the administration, for this. I think one of our missions has been very clear since the 6 years I've been on council. 6 years now, isn't that crazy? I got elected, Mayor George. Affordability and being able to stay in your home as an older adult and actually having the options to expand on your own property. I think that's really key to the success and longevity of our community, and I really just want to thank everyone who's involved in this. I think we really did get it right. to Mr. Baker's point, there's room for expansion too, as we see places where we could change this, expand it, make it even more accessible, Lakewood more accessible for more folks. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none on the motion to receive and file, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 8, substitute ordinance 7, 2023, an ordinance to take effect immediately, amending section 110302 definitions, 112103 permitted accessory uses, 112109 maximum lot area coverage, 112303 permitted accessory uses, 112304 conditionally permitted uses, 112309 maximum lot coverage, 113306 conversion of single-family structure prohibited, and 116103 supplemental regulations for specific uses of the codified ordinances in order to update the provisions.
Mr. President, move to substitute the version that appears on our docket.
I believe since it was substituted in committee, that's not necessary, if I'm not mistaken.
We, point of order, Mr. Chair, Mr. President, rather, we did not, we were not able to substitute it in committee, so the committee recommendation was to recommend to the full council adoption, provided that the planning commission revisions were incorporated. So that's the intent of the motion.
Thank you. I will second your motion.
Thank you.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'll just add one, Mr. President, rather.
Call me whatever you'd like, Tom.
I'll just add one more point. I'd like to thank the planning director for a lot of work and the whole team in the planning department. Not only did they put a lot of effort at the front end, but they also showed a lot of flexibility and diligence throughout the process. So we started in one place and we ended in a different place, and there was a lot of, I thought, collegiality and willingness to kind of go where the deliberation led, and I thought that made it for a better product, work outcome. And the other thing that I don't know if we touched on is clearly in the previous discussion, this also does some work to clean up lot coverage definitions to make sure that the code achieves the envisioned and intended purpose of preserving and protecting some green space or some unpaved space on every parcel affected. So that was discovered during the committee work and addressed in what's before us tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate the notion of letting a process play out and not being married to a specific outcome, but just letting things happen as they would through our deliberative process. Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion to substitute? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And that motion passes.
So we're
Councilman
making a move.
Baker, I was anticipating perhaps a motion on your part to amend.
Motion, so that everyone on the floor is aware, is currently within the new section 116103 supplemental regulations for specific uses, where ADUs are defined and their uses are kind of limited within a conditional use of the code. There's a provision that says that the rental term must be at least 180 days. And I believe that is in section 13 of BB. I would, and there was some discussion in the committee about it as well. I think about folks that come and live in Lakewood for a summer that are working downtown or working in Lakewood. But I do understand the intent, which is to stop from like extreme short-term rentals. So I think 60 days would be a nice floor that provides you basically between Memorial Day and Labor Day. So it'd give you a summer rental. So I would propose to amend section 116103 BB 13 to insert 60 days instead of 180 days.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Councilman Bullock?
Mr. President, 90 days would be between Memorial Day and Labor Day.
Counted.
You counted? June, July, August. However, yeah, I don't claim to, I appreciate the spirit of the amendment, and I think it's worth our discussion, but I don't claim to be the one that knows whether it should be 60, 75, or 90 days. Is there any advisory opinion to enhance the proposal of 60 days?
I mean,
Councilman Scheckter?
60 seems reasonable to me. I mean, it could be someone doing an internship or here for the summer, taking classes at Cleveland State, whatnot. I mean, provides a little bit of a gap there. So 60 is fine with me.
All right. Any further discussion on the motion to amend? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes.
I will move to adopt.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Once again, want to acknowledge all of the hands that have touched this ordinance to make it what it is. Since we've substituted on the motion, we'll do a roll call vote. Madam Clerk?
Baker,
Yes.
Bullock,
Yes.
Litton,
Yes.
Marks, Rader,
Yes.
Shackner.
Yes.
And that motion passes. And I'd like to, in the interests of Mr. McMahon's time, not to mention that we're probably getting billed for his time anyway, I'd like to move items 30 and 31 to next on our agenda.
Item 30, communication from Mayor George regarding water and sewer rates for 2024 to 2028.
Mayor George?
Thank you. I'm not going to read the entire communication. It's quite lengthy, but it's important. A lot of good information in that communication. I'm just going to read the first paragraph here. The City of Lakewood's implementation of the Integrated Wet Weather Improvement Plan, or what we like to call the IWIP, in accordance with and fulfillment of the consent decree entered by the Federal District Court for the Northern District of Ohio, constitutes the largest and most expensive infrastructure reinvestment in our city's history. The attached resolution authorizes sewer and water rate increases for the next block of 5 years that are necessary to sustain our progress and meet the city's legal obligations. As in past precedent, I respectfully ask that council consider referring this ordinance to the Finance Committee and including consideration of it in the December 11th, 2023 Finance Committee meeting where we discuss the capital budget. I'll also add our consultant, Lou McMahon, is here to talk maybe high level a little more, and those are the dates available for Joe Correa and Ref Tellis and the rest of the water sewer team to discuss in more detail.
Thank you. Mr. McMahon?
Mr. President, good evening. It's good to see everybody. Last time I was here was when the federal consent decree was being entered by the court, which was, again, if people forget, quite a triumph of the fact that we talked about good process leads to good results. It was our IWIP, our integrated plan that so many people spent so many years building, that the consent decree was built around. Basically, the federal court order tells us to go do what we set out for ourselves. Part of that IWIP plan was a financing plan that we were required to come up with, how we were going to pay for what we set out for ourselves in that schedule. And that financing plan included the idea of rate increases being very predictable to the extent that it could be equitable and to balance affordability. Those are all the important things we were trying to maintain in our sewer rates to keep Lakewood very affordable and competitive with our surrounding communities. So that financing plan used then a 4% increase per year to be very predictable for our ratepayers and our residents. In the meantime, since the plan was adopted and started being implemented, the council also approved an impervious surface fee, which is also another revenue stream. That helped the equity of the rate structure, so it's not just on water use that you get charged for, but because most of our capital projects that we're spending the dollars on under this program are wet weather related, the impervious fee speaks directly to that. It's for the runoff from property that is the source for how people are charged, and that's what's going directly into things like the big storage basins that we're designing and will be building. So this ordinance that's in front of you. It can be explained in more detail by Raftellus. They're the national firm that's been doing the economic and rate analysis all the way along with us. They'll be available on December 11th. But it outlines what the needs are. And again, we're in an inflationary environment. You talked about it earlier this evening. It's very important to stay ahead of inflation to give, so we can deliver these projects on the schedule we've set out. What's proposed are the 4% rate increases per year for the next 5 years, as well as bringing the impervious surface fee up by $1 per year up to a level of $5 per year, which is it's right below, I think, right where the sewer district has their impervious surface fee. So kind of bringing Lakewood still in the middle of the pack where our competitors are, our neighboring communities are, but giving us the financial wherewithal to be able to sustain the work that we're doing. The other side of the coin is not just rates, but what the administration has been very successful for a long time, but in particular with the dedication of the ARPA dollars, that has been a really important component to keep rates down. By using that cash from the ARPA funds, it avoided borrowing and using up borrowing capacity and paying interest. And again, then, we have a 100-year-old system in water and sewer. They are subject to emergency actions. We've had a number of them. The biggest one, of course, being the whole Interceptor project that's underway. And so to get ahead of that, we have to be doing more maintenance on a regular basis and inspecting. And then we have to have the financial ability to respond. So these rate increases, I think, they're the plan. We set ourselves out a plan to work, and now we're working the plan. This is fully in line with what we intended to do, and extremely prudent. I'll add one more point about integrated planning and Lakewood's integrated plan. Just 10 days ago, I was in a national conference in Asheville, North Carolina. I was on a panel with the guy from EPA headquarters who's in charge of all permitting. And he was talking to this whole conference about the importance of integrated planning. And he knew about Lakewood. He said Lakewood's a good example for a medium community that knows what they're doing. And I said, I worked on that, and, it was okay. And he goes, we know about Lakewood. So it's still a good example, and US EPA is turning to this even now, and you're going to hear more about it in the years coming up. Lakewood's way ahead of the curve on this. And, other communities are going to be doing the integrated planning because that's their path to compliance that they can afford. We've already done it. We've identified our priorities and an affordable way to get there. So this is more of it. I think there'll be a lot more to say on December 11th.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions?
Just
or comments?
real quick, two quick questions.
Councilman
One,
Rader.
I'm sure we'll get a deck like we got the last, I think, 5 years, now that I've been here so long. So it'll have all the comparisons for the other cities, and okay, great. I'm looking forward to that and digging into it and help us get our heads around this. Number two, does this exempt any users in the city, or is everybody, including industrial users, getting this 4% increase?
So the 4% increase, and the details are in the ordinance there, but the 4% increase is across the board on basically on water and sewer, on the cost of that. The impervious surface fee is just an increase in the dollar amount. That's all been figured out in terms of what the equivalent residential unit, so homeowners pay the one rate, and the people know what their units are. The rate's just going to go up.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll remind my colleagues who probably don't need much reminding on this that we, together with the mayor's suggestion, allocated $25 million of our ARPA funds towards this effort, partially as a means to mitigate some of these increases over time, which I'm sure our residents appreciate. And also, I'd just like to point out, I know I'm on my way out the door, but this consent decree ought to depoliticize the need to raise these rates because we have a consent decree, something we have to implement by that decree, and in a sense have no choice but to raise these rates. So there's no need for politics in terms of this conversation. Anyway, anything else to add from the administration or Mr. McMahon? Colleagues? Councilman Bullock?
Thanks, Mr. President. Mr. McMahon, thanks for being here as always. Councilman Rader may have touched on this. I want to clarify that impervious surface fee collection is per unit of surface area, correct? So somebody with a big lot will pay more than the listed rate because it'll be a multiple of the minimum defined size of impervious surface. I seem to recall that. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, Councilman, all residences pay the same rate. That's one of the things in implementing the program. In different, like the sewer district, because it's such a huge area, they have 3 different tiers depending on the size of the lot. But in Lakewood, in initiating this plan, we set it up so that all residential customers pay the same rate, instead of drawing distinctions and sort of drawing a line, frankly, somewhere in the middle where people were fighting over how many square feet they had. Most residential lots in Lakewood are pretty uniform. What's different is on the commercial side, that's where you get the big variability. So the non-residential side, I should say, which includes institutions, they each have their own number of ERUs, equivalent residential units, that is the basis for their fee.
Okay, and so is that commercial customer impervious surface fee also proposed to be modified in what's before us?
Absolutely.
All right, I'm not sure if that's listed here or it's implied in I'm looking at this line, impervious area, wet weather charge $2 going up to $5 over time. So it would be multiples just for the commercial customers.
Yeah, per ERU,
Okay.
per unit that they have. If they have 2, if they have 7, if they have 11, whatever they
Okay,
have.
so what you're saying, what you're clarifying and reminding us is that all residential customers in Lakewood are deemed to have only 1 ERU, whereas for commercial customers, we're actually measuring the square footage.
Correct. That's the
Okay.
work that was done when council passed the original program.
Okay, now secondly, I also recall, and so these are teasers for the hearing at which we are actually going to get into it. I'd love to understand the trends in billing and collections. I seem to recall when we put that in, the desire by the team recommending the change, because some of us had ideas about making it more involved and sophisticated, and the feedback was, slow down, let's get in a basic fee, see how the customer uptake or acceptance level is, see how our billing systems can adapt to the incorporation of this new paradigm in billing. So I'd love to get a report or, a summation of what we think, evaluation of how it's gone to date because of the complexity in billing. Because what's behind my question would be ultimately how much of a conservation price signal are we sending to customers who are going to want to save money and not unreasonably as sewer and water rates go up. And then the question is how much consumer education and transparency are we facilitating and helping. These are big lifts, so I'm not expecting that we have it all neatly resolved on day one, but these are, I think, important considerations as we move into this kind of billing space. At the same time, I recognize the tension, the financial tension here is that we're talking also as essentially trustees of the municipal utility, which needs to have collection sufficient to the capital obligations that we're obligated to meet. But maybe we could have a foot in both worlds to understand the individual ratepayers' perspective. So how's that for a small question?
Mayor, and Mr. President, I think on December 11th, when we talk about comparable communities, we can also marshal some information as to what the experience is in Lakewood, and not just in Lakewood, but in other places that have this fee. You talked about price signal and what that means, and how's that working out in other places. So we'll be able to speak to that more fully in the hearing.
Thank you.
And will that include results of the impervious fee, or have we not implemented that
like
yet?
the collections to date, yes, we can break that down.
Okay. Great, thank you. All right, on the communication, I don't know that a motion's been made, so I'll move to receive and file the communication.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Item 31.
Item 31, ordinance 35, 2023, an ordinance to take effect immediately amending sections 90204 rates and charges and 91501 establishment of rates of the codified ordinances to establish water and sewer rates for 2024 to 2028.
Move to refer to Finance Committee.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. President,
Councilman Bullock.
thought of one other question I intended to signal for the future hearing, and that is, have we been successful with any commercial property owners who have a large number of ERUs, impervious surface units, such that they're actually changing their, large parking lots to add bioswales and other features that would lower their impact on the wastewater system, which is so expensive? And whether that's tonight or another answer,
We can look into that more fully. I think what's been much more successful for Lakewood are the code provisions that have been changed over time. And when people are doing projects at the front end and all that, I don't think, I have not heard, and we can look into it, whether anybody in response to this fee have taken that on as a way to avoid that. I'm not
Okay.
certain that it rises to that level. And I'll just tell you, my understanding of the sewer district's experience with their credit manual for their impervious surface charge, which is now 10 years old, very mature program. I'm not aware of anybody of any size actually using that yet. So, that's on a much bigger scale, and those can be much bigger dollars than we've been talking about here. So it's something we can look into more fully.
It might be that the price signal's not strong enough because people are cautious about making it strong enough. Anyway, thanks. Good discussion.
Thank you, and I hope that my quip regarding your billable hours does not in any way diminish your commitment to the city of Lakewood over many years on this project, but on so many other things as well. Thank you, Lou, for your time and energy.
Thank you for letting me go home to see which jersey Taylor Swift wears, whether it's the Eagles or the Chiefs. Thank you very much.
Very exciting. All right, on the motion to refer, colleagues, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 9, report from Finance Committee regarding meeting held November 13th.
Chairman Schachner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, Finance Committee met November 13th to discuss Ordinance 18-2023, which proposes to increase the city's bidding and border control review threshold from $7,500 to $75,000. Following the committee's last discussion, the Law Department incorporated feedback from the committee and presented a proposed substitute version of Ordinance 18-2023, which the committee adopted. The proposed substitute amends the original in the following ways: sets the threshold for Board of Control review at $50,000 rather than $75,000, as proposed in the original version. Eliminates the annual inflation adjustment proposed in the original version. Requires the Department of Finance to establish internal controls for purchases and contracts less than $75,000 and to outline those in the annual budget. Requires the Department of Finance to submit a monthly report to council detailing all purchases greater than $7,500 and less than $50,000. Committee voted in favor of 3 additional amendments. The first changed the title of one of the code sections. The second amendment seeks to strengthen the internal controls for contracts and purchases under $75,000 by codifying a minimum standards for internal controls. The final amendment requires the Director of Finance to place the above-mentioned monthly report detailing purchases greater than $7,500 and less than $50,000 on the council docket on a monthly basis. Administrative voice objections to the second and third amendments. To allow for further discussion, the committee moved to defer Ordinance 18-2023. More remains to be seen in the next report, but move to receive and file that report.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Just want to thank the committee for so robustly discussing this ordinance. I know it's a lot, and that there's been a lot of give and take. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 10, Ordinance 18, 2023, an ordinance to take effect immediately establishing new purchasing limits in line with the Ohio Revised Code for the City of Lakewood.
I will move to substitute what came from the committee's work.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion?
Yes, I'll kind of take some from tonight's committee, so let's combine this report thing that's on next on the docket. Essentially, our discussion in finance, we did make some additional revisions to this final version. The first was to more clearly indicate that in Section 5 that we were changing the title. So that's now going to read that Section 111.03 Lakewood Hospital Contract repealed is hereby replaced by a new Section 111.03 entitled Department of Finance Reports / Internal Controls as outlined below. And then we did make some additional amendments, which I will outline as soon as I pull up the ordinance, which is over here. Okay, so we're looking at really Section 5 again, and this is in subsection A. It's under Department of Finance Reports, Internal Controls. We did change the third line, which in the substitute version, which will now, the first sentence is now going to read as follows, or something close to that. The Department of Finance shall apply specific internal controls for contracts or purchases less than $75,000, which will include a process as approved by council. That will make sense with other amendments. The last sentence is deleted of Section A, so the sentence that reads, council's approval of the annual written budget shall be considered approval of the internal controls and/or competitive processes. So that sentence is deleted. And then there's another amendment, so the sentence following the first sentence, so the second sentence, is going to read, the Director of Finance shall submit an outline of internal controls to City Council for approval, and something along the lines of which shall not be changed without further action by council. Sure, the final amendment which will be submitted, or the final version which will be submitted to the council clerk for codification, will have those more clearly set out because our clerks take excellent notes and minutes. But that's the gist of what the changes are.
And thank you, Councilman Schechner. On the motion to substitute, I'm looking to the law director here just because of the reference to a gist and us changing legislation here, and just wanting to make sure that this substitute is substantive, if that makes sense, given what Councilman Schechner just illustrated.
Thank you, Mr. President. It certainly is material, and I do think on the substance that we are there. If we wanted to take just a final look at the final language one more time, I'm certainly willing to work with through the chair on that to make sure that we've caught every change and go from there.
Right. I just want to make sure that thank you. I just want to make sure that we're as precise as we can be. I don't mind adopting tonight, but I also just want to make sure we know what exactly we're voting on in doing so.
Point of order, Mr. President. I think the committee clerk may have the precise wording in the notes. That Danielle maybe could be put on the hot spot to read back, or you do not. Okay. Okay. Understood. So perhaps
Mr. President.
Rather than, one moment, Councilman Baker, I tend to think rather than wordsmithing on the fly here, we ought to defer one more time and just make sure we get the language exactly right. Councilman Baker, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I commit to working with the clerk and the law director and the chair to make sure the language reflects what we discussed on the docket for the next full council meeting.
Okay, I just, not a means to delay anything, just want to make sure that we get this right. All right, I'll withdraw my original motion and move to defer. On the
Second.
motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, or Mr. President, just to clarify where things stand then. So we're on item 12, correct?
We are on item 10 of our
Item
docket.
10, excuse me. And so so we haven't taken any motion yet on that.
Well, I just made a motion to defer, but, and that's what we're
right,
discussing now.
right,
But
Very good.
it's simply put, I think there's a lot of good and substantive adjustments that have been made to this ordinance this evening in committee and here on the floor, discussed.
Understood. So then.
I just want to make sure that we're precise.
Agreed, and thank you for that important leadership. So what remains then would be to get a new, accurate, amended by committee version for council's vote and consideration at a future meeting, if I understand correctly.
True, and because finance is meeting rather regularly
Yeah,
in the
understood.
coming weeks, I imagine that can be a quick approval out of committee.
Very good, okay.
Any further discussion? I once again want to thank everybody for their work and leadership on making this happen. On the motion to defer, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 11, report from Finance Committee regarding meeting held November 20th, 2023.
Chairman Shackner, acknowledging you've probably already given half of your.
Yes, I'll incorporate what I said earlier, and then I would only add that we started our budget hearings. We heard from Director Dillinger from Human Resources. We heard from Director Rankator to give us a budget overview, and everybody was happy. So the end. That's the big announcement of what happened during that meeting.
All right. Certainly get the gist.
Yes.
Move to receive and file that report.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 12, Resolution 2023-55, a resolution to take effect immediately appointing Sam Pearson, Jessica Cotton, and one person to the Anti-Racism Task Force for 2-year terms beginning January 1st, 2024.
I'll entertain motions to start, just in case anyone has a name they'd like to suggest or anything along that line. Okay. Hearing none, I will move to defer.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 13, Resolution 2023-57, a resolution to take effect immediately appointing one person to Planning Commission for the 5-year term beginning January 1st, 2024.
Again, we'll entertain any motions if anyone has suggestions. Hearing none, I will move to defer.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 14, announcement from President Litton regarding 2024 Citizens Advisory Committee appointments.
Colleagues, you'll note this communication appointing several people to our CAC, our Citizens Advisory Committee. I thank my colleagues for aiding in a consolidated appointment list rather than doing them individually for the sake of time. But look forward to the service of all these individuals. Move to receive and file.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 15, Resolution 2023-63, a resolution to take effect immediately appointing Cindy Marks as ex officio non-voting council member to Lakewood Animal Safety and Welfare Advisory Board for a 2-year term.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 16, communication from Finance Director Rankator regarding 2023 year-end and 2024 budget ordinances.
Director Rankator.
Dear members of council, the following ordinances reflect appropriations, purchasing and contract authority, and revenues necessary to finalize the 2023 budget and implement the 2024 budget. They support the contents of the 2024 estimate of expense / comprehensive budget document and include all of those ordinances. Please refer the attached legislation to the Committee of the Whole or Finance Committee for further review for passage for December 31st, 2023.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Move to receive and file that communication.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And that motion passes. And next, I'd like to move that we suspend our rules and read items 17 through 29 concurrently.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Madam Clerk?
Baker?
Yes.
Bullock?
Yes.
Litton?
Yes.
Marks? Rader?
Yes.
Shackner?
Yes.
And that motion passes. Madam Clerk?
Item 17, ordinance 22, 2023, an ordinance to take effect immediately to establish appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Lakewood for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2023. Item 18, ordinance 23, 2023, an ordinance to take effect immediately authorizing the transfer in advance of certain funds. Item 19, ordinance 24, 2023, an ordinance to take effect immediately to establish appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the city for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2024. Item 20, ordinance 25, 2023, an ordinance to take effect immediately authorizing the mayor, the director of public works, the director of law, the director of finance, and/or purchasing manager to enter into contracts for professional services and to advertise for bids and enter into contracts for the purchase of repair, maintenance, and operating supplies, services, and equipment as authorized by the 2024 appropriation ordinance and the administrative code. Item 21, ordinance 26, 2023, an ordinance to take effect immediately authorizing and directing the mayor, the director of public works, the director of law, the director of finance, and/or purchasing manager to enter into contracts in accordance with the administrative code for vehicles, machinery, and equipment, contracts not to exceed the specified amount shown without separate resolution of council. Item 22, ordinance 27, 2023, an ordinance to take effect immediately authorizing and directing the mayor, the director of public works, the director of law, and director of finance, and/or purchasing manager to enter into contracts in accordance with the administrative code for buildings and facilities improvements, contracts not to exceed the specified amounts shown without separate resolution of council. Item 23, ordinance 28, 2023, an ordinance to take effect immediately authorizing and directing the mayor, the director of public works, the director of law, the director of finance, and/or purchasing manager to enter into contracts in accordance with the administrative code for parks and pools improvements, contracts not to exceed the specified amounts shown without separate resolution of council. Danielle's going to take the rest.
Item 24, ordinance 29, 2023, an ordinance to take effect immediately authorizing and directing the mayor, the director of public works, the director of law, the director of finance, and/or the purchasing manager to enter into contracts in accordance with the administrative code for sidewalk improvement program, contracts not to exceed the specified amount shown without separate resolution of council. Item 25, ordinance 30-2023, an ordinance to take effect immediately authorizing and directing the mayor, the director of public works, the director of law, the director of finance, and/or the purchasing manager to enter into contracts in accordance with the administrative code for traffic signs and signals, contracts not to exceed the specified amount shown without separate resolution of council. Item 26, ordinance 31-2023, an ordinance to take effect immediately authorizing and directing the mayor, the director of public works, the director of law, the director of financing, and/or the purchasing manager to enter into contracts in accordance with the administrative code for street infrastructure improvements, contracts not to exceed the specified amount shown without separate resolution of council. Item 27, ordinance 32-2023, an ordinance to take effect immediately authorizing and directing the mayor, the director of public works, the director of law, the director of finance, and/or the purchasing manager to enter into contracts in accordance with the administrative code for water systems replacement program, contracts not to exceed the specified amount shown without separate resolution of council. Item 28, Ordinance 33-2023, an ordinance to take effect immediately, provided it receives the affirmative vote of at least two, authorizing and directing the mayor, the director of public works, the director of law, the director of financing, and/or the purchasing manager to enter into contracts in accordance with the administrative code for wastewater system and treatment improvement program. Contracts not to exceed the specified amount shown without separate resolution of council. Item 29, Ordinance 34-2023, an ordinance to take effect immediately, authorizing the mayor, the director of public works, the director of law, the director of finance, director of planning and development, and/or the purchasing manager to enter into service contracts in accordance with the administrative code for the Department of Planning and Development, contracts not to exceed the specified amount shown without separate resolution of council.
Second.
I'm sorry, motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes. Item 32.
Item 32, communication from Assistant Finance Director Jessica Eady regarding income tax code changes.
Director Anketur, will you be taking this one?
Yes, sir, Mr. President.
Thank you.
House Bill, dear members of council, House Bill 33, the state's biennial operating budget, was signed by Governor DeWine on July 3rd, 2023. The bill included changes and updates to municipal income tax provisions in the Ohio Revised Code, Section 718, that need to be adopted to become effective on January 1st, 2024, included in Chapter 128 of Lakewood Codified Ordinance. These changes include minors being exempt from municipal income tax, an alternative apportionment for businesses with remote workers, net profit extension deadline extended by a month. Communications to taxpayers are prohibited if a federal extension has been filed, and maximum late filing penalties are reduced and waiver for first-time filers. Please refer this to Finance Committee for further discussion, and I would just add for your edification and Chairman Shackner that we intended to discuss this when Finance has their presentation also.
Thank you. Move to receive and file that communication.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. President, briefly.
Councilman Bullock.
Director Rankator, if I read this correctly, these are all requirements, new requirements from the state, and so the conversation is going to be ministerial in nature. It'll be how we comply rather than discretionary about the listed items. Is that correct?
That's how I would describe it, yes, sir, Mr.
Okay.
Bullock.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. On the motion to receive and file, any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 33, Ordinance 36, 2023, an ordinance to take effect January 1st, 2024, amending the tax code of the City of Lakewood to incorporate changes that have been mandated by the passage of House Bill 33 by the State of Ohio.
Move to refer to Finance Committee.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 34, communication from Human Resources Director Dillinger regarding updating the salary ordinance in accordance with the city charter.
Director Dillinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am submitting the attached updated salary ordinance for your approval to be effective as signed and passed in accordance with city charter. I'm recommending the following amendments. Update the pay ranges by the cost of living adjustment, which is 3% for 2024. Elimination of pay grade 25, which will most likely be less than the fair employment wage established in January 2024. And the property evidence technician position is in the AFSCME admin union, so no longer needed. Move the human resource specialist position from 29 to 31 due to the elimination of a part-time HR specialist, creating more responsibility and workload. Added a climate action and sustainability coordinator position to carry out the goals and mission of the climate action plan. Job description has already been approved by the Civil Service Commission. Due to anticipated retirements next year, the city is evaluating at a high level the structure of our finance department and is creating the unclassified position of tax commissioner, deputy finance director, and increasing the Civil Service Commissioner salary from $4,120 to $5,000 per year. The salary has not been updated since 2006. I appreciate your time and consideration.
Thank you. Move to receive and file that communication.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 35, ordinance 37, 2023, an ordinance to take effect January 1st, 2024, to provide for creating positions and rates of pay for full-time and certain part-time salaried employees and hourly rate employees not covered by a collective bargaining agreement in the several departments, divisions, and offices of the city, including chief of fire, chief of police, and civil service commissioners, and superseding all prior salary ordinances.
Move to refer to a committee with not much going on, the Finance Committee.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 36, communication from Human Resources Director Dillinger regarding the amendment of Section 149.14 hospitalization coverage for employees of the Administrative Code.
Director Dillinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. Attached is an ordinance amending Section 149.14 hospitalization coverage for employees of the Administrative Code. In 2015, when same-sex marriage became legal in the state of Ohio, the city of Lakewood stopped recognizing domestic partners for the purposes of medical and dental coverage as indicated in 149.14. We are striking that language to match our current definition of covered dependents as indicated in our medical and dental plans. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you again. Move to receive and file that communication.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 37, ordinance 38, 2023, an ordinance to take effect immediately, amending Section 149.14 of the codified ordinances to remove medical coverage for same-sex partners in light of the legalization of same-sex marriage in the state of Ohio.
In light of the immediate importance of such an ordinance, I'll move to suspend our rules to adopt on first reading.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Sorry, Councilman
Oh,
Schachter.
no, go ahead. Never mind. I'll wait till the actual ordinance.
Oh,
Not the suspended rules.
very good. On the motion to suspend the rules, Madam Clerk.
Baker? Bullock?
Yes.
Litton?
Yes.
Marks? Rader?
Yes.
Schachner?
Yes.
And that motion passes. Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Councilman Schachter.
Yeah, my only question with it is if this is relying on the fact that the only reason same-sex marriage is legal in Ohio is because of a U.S. Supreme Court decision, which in a dissent by Clarence Thomas did leave in the Dobbs decision, left the door open that the right to privacy that Roe was predicated on, the same right to privacy that, why can't I think? Was it Obergefell? They found that there's no space in the Constitution for that, or they overruled that. So since it's not a state law that allows for same-sex marriage, my concern is if that ever gets overturned and then we don't have this in our code, we're kind of leaving ourselves open. But I don't know if that was spoken about prior to. I'm just interested in what the discussion was prior to bringing the ordinance.
Thank you. Sorry, I cut you
No,
off.
go, please. I was just mumbling towards.
You were not.
I lost steam.
I'll look to the administration for any additional clarification on this ordinance, if any. Director Dillinger.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Given that this has been in place for some time, we just want our language to match what our practice is. It's no matter who's married, we require the same documentation, verifying that they're legal dependents. So we would continue to request that as long as it's still legal. And then, if it's something that got overturned, we certainly would address it, but I think that it's important that the language matches what we practice.
Thank you. Councilman Schachter, question?
So because same-sex marriage is legal in Ohio. As a policy, the city doesn't recognize, let me pull up the exact wording of the ordinance. Doesn't recognize, was it domestic partnerships, or what was it again? Sorry.
Correct, yes. We don't recognize domestic partnership regardless of same-sex or what used to be common law, I guess, or however it was phrased.
Okay. And so including coverage for same-sex domestic partners and children of same-sex domestic partners. So now, because it's legal, all right. So I guess if, God forbid, it ever does get overturned, and as to my knowledge, there hasn't been anything down the pike, even in the federal, in the circuits, determining a challenge to same-sex marriage. We could always amend the ordinance back if that were to happen.
Correct.
Okay. And just again, for my clarity, the city currently does not provide, even though it's in the ordinance, does not provide coverage to same-sex domestic partners.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Yeah,
Councilman Bullock.
Mr. Chair, Mr. President, thank you. I have some of the questions that Councilman Shackner raised. I just, frankly would feel a little more comfortable before voting for final passage, having the chance to confer with legal experts who practice in this field. I understand, I guess we're hearing from the HR director that we don't today have any covered employees or family members of covered employees that meet these definitions. So we think today there's no immediate impact for our employee family. But I guess I could envision a possibility in which a child of a same-sex domestic partner, where the marital status isn't complying with, legal marriage, could be a gap edge case. I don't claim to be the expert in this. I just would feel that our process would be more prudent if we afforded ourselves the chance to confer with, people who practice in this field. That's all.
Mr. President, if I may, through you. Yes, this is a common practice standard that and again, why the language doesn't reflect when this change occurred, I can't really speak to that. But, when Assistant Law Director had asked us to review charter for the charter amendment that will be coming up, I also took it upon myself to look through our employment provision 149 and was looking for anything and caught this. So I'm not an attorney, and so I won't speak to legal terms, but I do think that this puts us in a position that someone could reference this and say, well, it says you're supposed to cover me and you don't, and that's not our practice. And it is a standard in the industry that when that became legal in the state of Ohio, that we stopped covering domestic partners. And again, I think if we look at how do we keep costs down where we can, especially when it comes to benefits, as we just spoke a few hours ago in the finance meeting about how expensive benefits can be. I think it's prudent that we are making sure that we're covering legal dependents, which does allow for same-sex marriage, and then their dependents are also covered under our benefits. So I would say this isn't this is common in the industry of covering dependents. But yeah, I mean, if you want to go get second opinions, I guess by all means, but I would say this is a normal practice within the field.
Mr. President?
Councilman Shackner.
Yeah, I recognize what it could leave the city open to by keeping something in there that we don't actually do as a policy. And I do recognize that it doesn't say what we're removing doesn't say just domestic partners. It's same-sex domestic partners. So that was most likely put in place because we wanted to help same-sex couples when it wasn't legal in Ohio and provide them coverage. So I'm comfortable voting yes on this today, knowing that we will have, just like with the Dobbs decision, we'll have a lot of runway to prepare just in case this ever goes, because it would have to go up to the U.S. Supreme Court again for this to be, or Ohio's constitutional amendment disallowing same-sex marriage to be put into effect. So with the fact that we're going to have a lot of runway in case same-sex marriage is on the chopping block with the U.S. Supreme Court, I'm comfortable with making this change.
Thank you. Colleagues, any further discussion?
One question.
Councilman Rader.
And this has less to do with the city, in fact, nothing to do with our practices, because I believe them to be industry leading and incredibly progressive. But to the law of the letter of the law of this, are there protections that are in place, either statewide, federally, somewhere, that would ensure that same-sex couples were treated exactly the same, married same-sex couples were treated exactly the same under the law and policies? Like, say administrations down the road, somebody wanted to exclude for any reason somebody who was in a relationship like that, a marriage. Would this law affect it one way or the other? Are there federal laws that, for anti-discrimination, that would not allow us to give a partner that are married, that are heterosexual, the same benefits as someone who is gay, married?
Sure. So I can't speak to the legal side of things, but what I would say is that when we insure anybody, even my child I'm about to have in a week, I have to submit a birth certificate that shows that I'm their legal parent, social security card. Same thing happens when someone gets married. They're required to provide us their marriage certificate that is stamped with the court seal of wherever they get married, or the county seal of wherever they are married. So, we require that documentation before we cover anyone. So as long as, whether same-sex or not, they're claiming that person's their dependent, we require that documentation as proof. So there would be no way for us to prevent covering someone if they could provide that documentation.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any further discussion, colleagues? Appreciate the questions and answers from my colleagues in the administration, respectively. Madam Clerk, if you would call the roll.
Baker?
Yes.
Bullock?
Yes.
Litton?
Yes.
Marks? Rader?
Yes.
Schachner?
Yes.
And that motion passes.
Item 38, communication from Assistant Law Director Crossman regarding imposing a moratorium on the issuance of permits for adult-use cannabis business.
Law Director Vargo, I assume you're taking this one?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. In Mr. Crossman's absence, I'll fill in for him. Dear Council President Litton and members of City Council, on November 7 of this year, Ohio voters approved State Issue 2, which proposed to adopt legislation to permit recreational or adult-use cannabis in Ohio. Unless amended or repealed by the Ohio General Assembly, the proposed legislation will become effective December 7, 2023, as ORC Sections 3780.01 through .99. We'll refer to that as the Act. The Act establishes a division of cannabis which will ultimately adopt procedures and regulations regarding the implementation of an adult use program within 9 months from the effective date of the legislation, which is September 7, 2024. Additionally, both the governor and members of the Ohio General Assembly have indicated that they are committed to amending the Act as currently written, but have not identified what the changes will be made as of this date. Given this uncertainty regarding the final form of the Act and its implementation, and given that the city has not yet had ample opportunity to consider the best method of implementation of adult use in Lakewood, we are recommending the adoption of a temporary moratorium on issuing any permits related to businesses seeking to operate a recreational cannabis business in Lakewood until at least July 31, 2024. This proposed moratorium will temporarily pause the ability of businesses to obtain permits from the city to begin the process of opening a facility related to adult use, while enabling the city the time it may need to adopt measures that council and the mayor may deem appropriate to carry out the will of the voters in an orderly fashion. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll first move to receive and file that communication.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Colleagues, I'll remind you or inform you if you might not have been on council at the time, but when the medicinal use of marijuana was legalized in the state of Ohio, you may recall that we implemented a moratorium there just so that the city could get its proverbial ducks in a row in preparation for the full legalization. This isn't meant to hinder this legalization. It's just simply meant to help us prepare as a city for this implementation. So I wanted to throw that out. Is there any further discussion on the motion to receive and file? Councilman Baker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. And I'm just curious. I appreciate the thoughtful approach about making sure we have our ducks in a row. When can council expect to see some legislation, or I'd commit myself to working with the law department on this. I was on Planning Commission when code section or chapter 779 was created, which is the medical marijuana use. So A, timing, and then B, do we expect to update that chapter to allow for adult use, or are we creating a whole new chapter? Do we have any indication on that front?
If I could chime in, I think it depends when the House and the Ohio House and Senate make any changes. I have it up here that Senate President Huffman has outlined plans to pass a package of changes to Issue 2. So we got to see what the House and the Senate end up doing before we can even move forward. So we'll be paying close attention to what happens down in Columbus.
And
we'll be happy to work with council members on, next steps.
And I would only add that the previously mentioned medicinal marijuana moratorium had to be extended as well, just because of the state dragging its feet might not be the right term, but taking longer than expected on the implementation side of that legislation. So we may, or you all may, need to extend this moratorium at some point as needed. Any further discussion, colleagues? Councilman Rader.
I'll just say that, I think we all realize here that Lakewood was very supportive of Issue 2, to say the least, 81-point-something%. And it's something I voted for, it's something that I think we're all excited about. And part of the reason that I'm excited about is we have 2 dispensaries, and they're doing very well. Some of the fears that were outlined when I was on council back then, and we passed that, never came to fruition. They're very safe facilities. They've been great assets to our community, and we're looking at, I just want to say on the record, we're looking forward to embracing this, at least one of 7, very much looking forward to, I think my colleagues will agree, to ushering in this new industry into Lakewood. And we know we're going to do it thoughtfully, and I think that's what this is about, just getting it right, and offer anything I can do to help them draft or whatever we need to do to make this happen in a way that we do in Lakewood. We do things right. We get it to a point where I think everybody will feel safe, comfortable, and that we'll actually be able to provide all the services that our residents so desperately want. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilwoman Marks.
Thank you. I'd like to know for the administration, could you tell me how this will impact some issues that are in front of planning for the RISE facility on Madison?
Thank you, Councilwoman. Through the President, the RISE now is a medical dispensary, and the resolution or the ordinance, the resolution seeking the moratorium is with respect to adult use. What was passed by the voters in the initiative is related to adult use. Now, to your point, there's always overlap in the margin. There's allowances for current medical dispensaries to automatically be able to dispense adult use. So that's just one of many complexities that we'll have to understand once the final statute comes out of the General Assembly, and try to have a cohesive ordinance for the city that addresses all of those issues.
Thanks for that comment, and I do understand that, but maybe Director Leininger can offer some additional information, because I do believe that RISE has been in front of planning already for some alterations to their existing structure. Will this delay any of that, their submissions to planning?
So, first of all, good evening, Mr. President, members of council. No, this will not impact their plans as they're moving forward. To Director Vargo's point, they are permitted and allowed to make this expansion as a medicinal marijuana facility. They can continue to pursue that under those rules and regulations, knowing that there's going to be some new rules in place that they'll be able to comply with in the future.
Okay, great. Thanks for that clarification. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. On the motion to receive and file, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 39, Resolution 2023-64, a resolution imposing an immediate moratorium on the issuance and processing of permits allowing retail dispensaries, cultivators, or processors of adult use marijuana within the city of Lakewood.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Thankful for the thoughtful discussion on, in an effort to understand what the moratorium means and what it does not mean as well. All right. On the motion to adopt, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 40, communication from Planning Director Leininger and Development Officer Wyman regarding fiscal year 24 HUD Annual Action Plan Resolution and Lakewood Citizens Advisory Committee fiscal year 24 federal funding allocation recommendations.
Director Leininger.
Good evening again, Mr. President, members of the City Council. Lakewood Citizens Advisory Committee approved its FY24 Community Development Block Grant and Emergency Solutions Grant allocation recommendations to City Council on September 13th, 2023. Based on estimated 2024 CDBG and ESG awards of $1.85 million and $165,000 respectively. I respectfully submit for your consideration the Department of Planning and Development's FY24 Annual Action Plan Resolution and the CAC's, or the Community Advisory Committee's FY24 CDBG and ESG allocation recommendations. I'm happy to answer any questions. This is an annual process that we go through and is part of your the annual budget process for 2024.
Thank you. Move to receive and file that communication.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Of course, want to thank our Citizens Advisory Committee as well as our Planning Department for all of their work in preparing this. Any further discussion?
Mr. President.
Councilman Bullock.
Do we, Director, have a crystal ball saying when we will know the actual, get an updated estimate of the 2024 awards? I think, if memory serves, were those levels in the letter Mr. Wyman and you are referring to are conservative estimates, and that we've been coming in close to $2 million annually, I think, which has been flat for a while.
It's actually been dropping.
It's been dropping.
So we,
Okay.
before the current year, we were estimating 1.9 million. We rolled that back to 1.85 million is for this fiscal year. We're recommending that stay the same for 2024. But our numbers have decreased. Last year, it was in fact below, or this year, it was in fact below 1.9 million. We generally don't get the actual number until spring. Sometimes that's in March, sometimes it's as late as May or June. But we usually don't receive that number until end of first quarter, beginning of second quarter, 2024.
Okay, so we could be, but we do our best to fall within 10%, if I recall.
To the extent we can,
Yeah.
yes. And there's as part of it, and we'll see this as we get into the budget discussion next Monday. There's procedures in place for when we do have an overage from the 1.85 million, how that gets allocated out to all of these organizations.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. And colleagues, you'll recall that at times we've been asked to approve adjustments to these because that amount is different from what was originally expected as well. Director Leininger, is that number based on the economics of our city, of our residents?
So in part, yes, but it's also based on a whole system formula that the federal government has based on budget years allocation through Congress. So it does fluctuate, but it's been relatively consistent, but declining in part because we are showing a declining population at the national level, even though we dispute that a little bit. We think we're holding steady, and we are benefiting from some positive demographic changes from an income standpoint.
Sure. And do or will any of our low to moderate income areas change in any way going forward as a result of that rising?
At some point, yes. Dan would know this better than I would. When the last update occurred to the CDBG defined areas, I believe that's usually midpoint between censuses, censi. So we'd probably be looking at it here in the next couple of years.
Very good. Thank you. On the motion to receive and file the communication, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And that motion passes.
Item 41, Resolution 2023-65, a resolution to take effect immediately authorizing and directing the mayor to submit the fiscal year 2024 one-year action plan of the fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 24 five-year consolidated plan, which includes dollar allocations and activities to be funded with federal CDBG and ESG resources, any other entitlement funds received from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, all amendments thereto and all understandings and assurances contained therein, and incorporates the city's application to HUD for fiscal year 24 CDBG and ESG funds.
Move to refer to Finance Committee. Motion's been made and seconded. Director Leininger, were there, and you may not know, maybe this is a Dan Wyman question, but were there major differences between the administration's recommendations and those of the committee?
No, typically, because of how the funding has to get split out, with so much going to public services, so much going to the social agencies, the requests are generally already aligned with that, and so it stayed pretty consistent with what the administration's recommendations were.
Great. And I'll remind everybody here in the audience and otherwise how Lakewood does this through a 17-member volunteer committee to decide where $1.8 plus million goes in our city, whereas many other cities it's the sole role of a council member or whatever the case may be to distribute these funds. And I find Lakewood's methods to be as democratic as I've ever seen. On the motion to refer, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes. And with that, I believe we are at the conclusion of our docket for this evening. Are there any people signed in for public comment? No? Okay. Announcements from the administration? Announcements from my colleagues?
Mr. President,
Councilman Baker.
go Bucks.
Also wanted to add a couple of things, one of which is attended a well-attended ribbon cutting over at Winterhurst Ice Arena, which was just a really great thing to see. I think we have a great community partner there. Great to see there's a girls' locker room there as the father of a girl hockey player, and just thankful for everything that got us to that point. And thanks for a wonderful evening. Mayor, I understand you got to drop the puck as well at the game, which was nice. And then also, I believe, Director Dillinger, this is your final meeting of the year and onward for a little while. And so since this is our last meeting together, I just wanted to thank you for all of your work and appreciate our ability to work together for the good of Lakewood.
Likewise, Mr. President, you will be missed, and I know we won't be working together after the first of the year, but thank you for everything. And I said this during my finance presentation, but thank you, Council, for everything you've done to make parental rights available for the city staff here. It's nice knowing that I don't have to worry about a paycheck and can take care of my family. So thank you to all of you, and happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving and congratulations in advance. Anything further, colleagues? Hearing none, I will move to adjourn. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And that motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.